All right. We are live today with Jordan. Jordan is the CEO and founder of Previsible. Previsible is a search education and consulting practice that supports Fortune 100 companies in investing into organic search. So, from that, you're going to have a little bit of an idea of what we're going to be diving into today. A little fun fact about Jordan is that he was also the head of SEO and content development at eBay. He managed the single largest channel of traffic to eBay and created the most significant search growth in company history. And Jordan's eBay experience spans through digital, search, and content marketing, as well as leadership and management. So, we are very excited to have Jordan on today. He has a vast experience and lots of insight and across many different niches, markets, industries. So if anyone's listening and has questions, now's your perfect time to pop them through. Jordan, thank you so much for coming on the webinar. How are you keeping today?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. Thank you both for having me here, and super excited to talk about not only my past, but even kind of some career, job development
Hmm.
of skills in the SEO craft. So looking forward to the whole conversation.
And the future of SEO.
always,
um,
always on my mind.
I just wanted to thank you also for coming on so early and catching a red eye flight and making it all the way through. Jordan's currently on the other side of the world. He is currently in America at the moment. Yeah, I think, Jordan, if you could kick it off by just telling us a little bit about how you got into SEO and sort of a
Sure.
brief history of how you got to where you are now as the CEO and founder of Previsible.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually got started in 2000. I built a Spanish bookstore, and I thought that the book business was the way to go in terms of developing a website. Little did I know there wasn't a lot of margins in books, and although Spanish books was a very good vertical for me, I was able to build both a bilingual website over 20 years ago, but I was able
Yeah.
to outrank Amazon, and that's what actually got me into SEO. So back then in 2000, for those of you that don't know, Amazon only sold books. Now you can buy like livers and health insurance plans on Amazon. So the reality is that it was like a 800-pound gorilla, and it was a David Goliath type story because I was just this recent college grad who built his own website in a garage and was outranking Amazon for everything, titles, categories, and the works. That
Mm.
sprung a career in the SEO industry. I went to work for Network Solutions, and that was a big domain registrar, and they would help develop websites for small businesses. Then I went to Answers.com, then eBay. eBay was amazing, and as you mentioned, it was a phenomenal career opportunity for me. I got to learn how to not only manage a global SEO program, but also understand what it really takes to drive all the components of SEO, from product to content to the leadership management of SEO, right? Like how do you create a message and a story around the SEO program in a company as big as eBay? When I
Mm.
left eBay, I went to Searchmetrics and spent nearly 8 years at Searchmetrics. My last 3 years as CEO at Searchmetrics, which was phenomenal. I got to go from being an in-house SEO to then going into the software space and the data space and helping to spread the message around how to scale SEO to agencies and in-house SEOs all over the world. And that was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed getting to connect with the whole SEO community through that role. And then 2020, I stepped down, and the pandemic happened, and my children were looking at me like, "Hey, Dad, what are you going to be when you grow up?" Because I was out of a job. The pandemic was going on, and nobody knew what was happening, and all of a sudden, I just started getting calls from friends and people in the industry saying, "Hey, I need help with SEO. Can you help out?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll help out, but I'm looking for a job. I'm looking for the next thing." So one project turned into three turned into six. Before I knew it, I was building Previsible. Today, we have nearly 40 employees, an office in
Wow.
Santiago, Chile, and we have nearly 40 clients. About 70% of that is enterprise. So, like you mentioned, like we do a lot of Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies. Companies like Yelp, Atlassian, many other international and global brands as well in our portfolio. And it's exciting to be able to work with those teams and drive the human component of SEO while thinking about the technology and the evolution and where SEO is going.
I actually just want to backtrack to one thing that was quite interesting when you mentioned you were at eBay, which was understanding the story behind SEO and the story behind products and selling the products. How was that like? I can appreciate that it may have been quite challenging at the time, especially with such a big platform like eBay. For any SEOs that are in the e-commerce space, sort of, could you tell us a little bit about how you tackled that side of things, and do you have any advice to them on how to approach SEO on the e-commerce side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the e-commerce SEO is kind of a unique vertical, and it has a variety of different lenses to it, right? The complexity of eBay is that it's a global marketplace, right? So in any marketplace, you have to deal with both dynamics, the supply side and the demand side. The supply side being all the sellers, any of you could put something for sale on eBay, and I could put the same item for sale on eBay. But which item should Google index, and why should they pick Jordan's over anybody else's, right? And that's the complexity of what you're dealing with in a marketplace e-commerce scenario. Whereas it's very different in, say, verticalized e-commerce. Say you're only selling, chocolate, or you're only selling clothing. Those verticalized e-commerce businesses have to maintain an authority within their vertical. They have to be able to push forward not only against marketplaces, but their own verticalized competitors. And so the efforts are different, but the beauty of my role at eBay was my job wasn't just to figure out what items that we had to deal with, but it was also like what markets, how to scale those markets. Do you put listings in Australia that are for sale in the United States but shipped to Australia? Do you only put things in Australia? How do you build out categories and category pages differently? And one of the biggest projects that I got to work on was this product called BHP. And fortunately, you can probably find some not so kind words about the BHP program because it got penalized by Google. And the reason it got penalized by Google is because eBay is a very complex ecosystem. So what we did is we took all of our internal search data, we mapped it, and we said, hey, there are certain categories or ways that our consumers on eBay are searching for things. Let's take, for example, mobile phones, right? You can take mobile phones, you can take all the different brands, Samsung, Apple, LG, you go on and on with the different brands, right? Then you can take the models, right? You can take every single model that exists in the phone, right? But the unique thing about eBay is that we also sell cracked screen iPhones, right? And that isn't a real category. That doesn't have a specific product ID to it. But every day, millions of cracked iPhones are sold on eBay. And so what BHP did is it didn't just take into account the structured components of a category. It also took into account the unstructured ones, like a cracked iPhone. And when Google identified that, hey, you guys have structured things and these kind of crazy offshoots, we think that you're spamming our index. So they penalized the whole directory. But it was a very challenging and frustrating thing to go through because from our vantage point, we were saying, hey, this is what our consumers are buying. We're not creating a page of false products. It's just that our products are unique to our marketplace. And that's what makes eBay and marketplace e-commerce very unique from verticalized e-commerce.
Okay. Excellent. Wow. Very interesting. Yeah. Darius?
And Jordan, on that, just so many questions, but just to stick with the eBay at the minute. Obviously, when eBay come calling it, it's hard to turn it down. You have great opportunity, but was there any sort of worries going into a company in a role that large? And can you sort of talk us through that sort of time frame and how you got over that?
Well, I was very lucky. I got hired into a team. Actually, the entire team, I think, was all Europeans. I was the only American. Most of them had actually immigrated from Germany and the Netherlands to join the global SEO team in San Jose, California. Dennis G, Matthias Klabenbach, who's still there, Thomas Seifert, who went on to work at a bunch of other marketplace businesses. Those three gentlemen actually hired me into the eBay SEO team. And these guys had a tremendous amount of knowledge. Like they had a huge head start on me. And I got to learn a ton from them, and work with them over the years that I was there. And they led the way. And candidly, Dennis G is a mastermind of marketplace SEO. And I think that, anytime you're in an ecosystem or a role that is that complex and that unique, it's not a lone SEO effort, right? And I think that's one of the challenges about the SEO industry is that many SEOs, they're very much isolated, right? Like there's only one of you in the company. I was not one. I was one of many. And I only mentioned three of many other individuals that over those years worked on SEO, whether they were PMs, engineers, content marketers. There were many, many other names that I did not mention that were part of the SEO construct that helped grow that program. That's not the case for a lot of SEOs out there, right? And I think that's one of the great challenges that we have as an industry is how do you develop that community within a in-house team or even on an agency side that can support clients and make SEO successful in any organization.
Love it.
Awesome. Jordan, I think fast forwarding a little bit to actually when you built Previsible, how had you sort of, I think growing it to 40 plus teammates right now is quite an impressive feat. And especially with, I guess, the job market being as competitive and tough as it is right now, how did you find it when growing Previsible? And do you have any sort of expectations for the future, maybe coming 6 months or to a year? And do you have any advice, I guess, to SEOs that are entering that job market as intense as it is right now?
Sure, I'll try to break that up in a couple different chunks. So,
Yeah.
Previsible, our growth, where we're going, I'll quickly touch on that, and then I'll talk about like where the SEO, or I think the SEO market's going. But so for Previsible, we're pretty unique in the way that we approach the SEO challenge. We fundamentally believe that SEO is a human-driven industry. Like you have to have the right people to execute the outcomes that you want in SEO. So we have both a unique model in terms of how we support clients. We call it a diamond model, which is unique in the sense that we bring in people's skills, whether they be technical, content, project management, strategy, into a group that support any given one of our accounts. That's one of the things that we really fundamentally believe is that by having this team-based approach and having this group, this diamond group, we actually are having a bigger impact on how SEO is executed in any one of our clients. The other thing that we're really passionate about is the development of people in the SEO space. So one of the things that we've been doing a lot of is helping teams with understanding how to develop their organization around SEO. What kind of resources do you need? If you're a marketplace business or if you're a large international enterprise, how many engineers do you need to really make SEO work? Right? It's not a question that's easily answered. And it's certainly not a question that's been well answered if you look at how most companies do SEO these days. So the reality is like one of the things that we fundamentally focus on doing in Previsible is not just selling more consulting hours, but how do you build the human resources behind making a successful SEO program? Transitioning that into where SEO is going. So SEO is going in a very interesting direction. I'm actually super excited, and I'm going to probably open up as maybe this is an American phrase, I'm not entirely sure, a can of worms here, maybe more than one can of worms. But like the reality is that there's two things happening with SEO. One of them is the AI revolution is obviously making our work far more scalable. It's making our work far more dynamic. It's creating a tremendous amount of noise in terms of how to rethink what quality is, how to rethink what data is in our space. Simultaneously, we're entering a whole new vacuum of information. For many SEOs, we're very comfortable with the fact that 90% of the keywords we get are called not provided. It's the most popular keyword in SEO. We just don't ever talk about it because the reality is Google doesn't give us much keyword data. And this is now happening for paid search. This is happening for other digital marketing channels. And as their data starts to diminish, just like it had for us 12 or so years ago, whenever not provided was introduced by Google, all of a sudden our channel is at a level playing field with other marketing and digital marketing channels. So this is going to really change the way business leaders and owners of companies think about SEO, how they're going to invest in this channel, because candidly, paid search is becoming a bigger black box, and other marketing channels are becoming a black box in a cookieless world, in a PMAX world that has been introduced in the last 24 months.
Awesome. So you actually kind of briefly touched on it and opened the can of worms up, but I actually wanted to ask you, when you sort of moved into creating and founding Previsible, how did you find sort of with your client side of things, emphasizing the need for SEO and the need for clients to invest in SEO's practices? So you did briefly sort of touch on the human resources aspect of it, but have you found any sort of prominent bottlenecks over the past year or so? And do you have any, I guess, tips for other client-facing SEOs that are trying to sort of communicate across the importance of SEO to business?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to start off with a pretty bold statement, but fundamentally, every single SEO has been lying for a very long time. And they've been lying because they tell everybody, their clients, they tell themselves, they wake up in the morning, they look in the mirror and they say, SEO takes time. SEO doesn't take time. SEO is an investment. Investments mature over cycles, and those cycles have different expectations in terms of metrics that you look at. And I think that this whole concept of us telling every single client or every single product manager in-house, hey, SEO just takes time, is a terrible way of educating our partners on what the hell is happening, right? Because there's stuff happening. There's crawl happening. There's indexation happening. There are URL errors and page errors and server errors and all kinds of different expectations that Google has in order for us to get to the final result, which is a sale or a conversion. And so telling everyone that it takes time is a terrible way to teach everyone SEO, because there's so many things that happen in between. And what we should be doing is saying, hey, this is where we're at. We're right here. We're in the crawl phase of things. And by the way, Google isn't crawling our URLs right because you have a bunch of parameter URLs or your core web vitals just suck. And so we don't actually go through those phases in a very informative, educational, and driven way, data-driven way. And thus we create this vacuum. And that vacuum is what creates a huge frustration with clients who are saying, what the hell is my SEO traffic? Or why didn't I get more sales out of SEO? And it's simply because if you give them the cop out of, hey, it takes time, they then don't know what to look for. They only expect the result every single time they talk to you.
No, I love
So
that.
how do you effectively, I guess, communicate that? Because I think it is a very interesting topic to say it actually doesn't take time. There is things happening. But with previous webinar guests that we've had, I think we are like struggling to sit in the middle of trying to balance terminology and having the clients understand what's happening. Have you ever experienced like a discrepancy between clients understanding what like a crawl is or anything like that? Or just been able to just use an analogy to tell them where we are currently in our pipeline? Has there been anything like that when you sort of communicate to your clients?
Oh, 1,000,000%. And it's a three-dimensional problem. And what I mean by that is sometimes, depending on who the audience is, the formation of your language and the way you communicate SEO changes, right? So the first piece of any good development as an SEO is knowing who you're talking to. And the reality is, if you're going to talk about SEO and what's happening to an engineer versus talking to the CMO of the company, you're using totally different language. Like, I'm not going to go walk into some CMO's office and talk about, key details of core web vitals and how our page speed has diminished over the last 6 months. They're going to look at me like I'm a crazy person. But I can go into an engineer's office and talk about that super effectively and say, hey, here's where our pain points are. This is what we need to do differently. We have a bunch of legacy code here, or we have JavaScript that isn't rendering properly. Whatever the issue is, You can have an effective conversation with an engineer at that level. With the CMO, it's really about having a key conversation about performance and understanding what terms around performance matter to a CMO, right? And so those are just two separate conversations entirely about this exact same topic. And that's one of the most important things to learn as an SEO is who your audience is, and then building that library of terms that allow you to have a conversation with that audience. The sooner you can do that, the better off you're going to be in talking about the phases of SEO and where you're at in the development of your program, your initiative, your project, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. You're going to be far better at doing that when you have the library and you know your audience. Because the biggest challenge we have as SEOs is that everybody comes to ask us SEO questions. Everybody. It's executives, it's the content writer, it's the PM, it's some very lonely business analyst. All of these people are asking us questions. Knowing who that audience is and then the terms that's going to resonate with them to be effective in communicating where we're at is absolutely critical, because all those people are advocates of SEO, but they need to know what's happening.
Yeah, no, I love that. And Jordan, like we sort of emulate that as well. Like a lot of candidates come to us and ask us, how can we get into that top sort of salary bracket of SEOs? And a lot of it is down to like understanding the commercial acumen and how SEO fits into like the wider sort of business model. So I think what you said there is like bang on. I think we'll be clipping that and putting that everywhere on LinkedIn over the next couple of weeks. But on that, that's what I sort of wanted to touch on from your background. So you're head of SEO and content development with eBay, and then within sort of less than a decade, you're a CEO. Where did your commercial acumen sort of come into play? Where did you learn that from? How did you pick it up? And what sort of advice would you give to other people if there's any sort of books or industry experts to follow?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's this new phrase I've been learning for the last 6 to 8 months. We as SEOs, we have another favorite term that I'm trying to eradicate from our vocabulary. It depends.
I knew that was coming.
And I'm trying to get rid of this one because it depends doesn't work very well in the business world. So I'm now migrating that to a new phrase called NORA, no one right answer. And the reality is that to answer your questions, there's no one right answer. There's a lot of different ways that we can grow that acumen and that muscle. But the one reality is that you have to always be practicing it. So it's like learning a foreign language. It's like learning how to master a new skill. You have to practice it all the time. You have to be willing to put yourself in the positions to practice it. One of the things I hear a lot these days from SEOs who are just starting their careers is, I just want to be a technical SEO. And I'm like, well, that doesn't work, right? That's like saying I want to be a footballer, but I don't want to kick the ball. How the hell are you going to do that? Like that doesn't make any sense, right? You're just going to head the ball every time. Like that's the challenge that we have to break ourselves from, is that a key skill in SEO is a tactical aspect. It's a tool that we can use to do our job. We can, decode what technically is wrong with a site, or we can come up with a content strategy and do keyword research. These are tactical skills that we all are developing and growing. But at the same time, we're growing that business acumen, that communication acumen, that reporting and performance acumen. And those are all happening at the same time. Hence, this is a 3-dimensional game, right? And so to answer your question, some of the things that happen in my career that isn't going to be the same for everybody else is at a very early phase of my life, I had to talk about SEO in business terms, right? So let's go back all the way back to 2000 when I started the Spanish bookstore. So the Spanish bookstore started because when I was in university, I did a investor pitch to get money for the Spanish bookstore. So the reality is, from day one, I had to explain how much revenue I'm going to make, how many conversions I'm going to have. I had to convince people to invest in my company and why the Spanish bookstore made sense in America. Now, needless to say, the only investors I got were friends and family. And I feel bad for them because their investment didn't really pay off to becoming millionaires. But it was a great experience and a great learning experience to be able to sit up in front of investors, VCs, at a very young age and have to explain not just SEO, but explain what it means, how we're going to generate revenue from it. And so those are the types of experiences that started to form my then capability to do that at enterprises like answers.com and eBay. And at eBay, notably, one of the biggest challenges I had during my career there is we got hit with a very nasty penalty that created a significant negative result in revenue, or GMB is what they call it at eBay, literally overnight. And to sit in the CEO's office with my CMO and my VP of e-commerce and actually have to articulate what just happened is not exactly the easiest thing to do. Especially when we're talking that this is impacting hundreds of millions of dollars and potentially people's jobs. And it ended up being, there's records of this mentioned in earnings calls. So those are the types of formative experiences that help me become better at articulating SEO to these different audiences. It's not going to be the same for everybody, but you have to be willing to put yourself in those places. You have to be willing to sit in those uncomfortable situations and explain and articulate what's happening from an SEO point of view.
Love it. And then fast forward a couple of years, you've got that commercial acumen. You don't plan on necessarily starting Previsible, but as you mentioned, you get sort of clients are coming on. Two sort of questions. What was the one thing that made you go, right, I'm going to dive fully into this? And secondly, what role was your first hire and why was that key?
Oh, the second question is an interesting one. It's kind of an interesting story. What drove me into like doing this is that I was really enjoying it. I was just having a lot of fun, and I still am. And I think that's a big part of it. Like, you have to do things that you enjoy, and you have to wake up every day wanting to do it. And so the reality is, like, helping different businesses and business types and different SEOs at different levels of their career and their knowledge is something I get to do every single day, because I get to jump on client calls and work with super junior SEOs or super talented SEOs who could run circles around me. And that's super exciting because I get to do that every day. And at the same time, I get to peek under the hood of every single type of business, everything from real estate to local businesses to software companies to new AI companies. I get to see under the hood of all these companies, and that's super exciting. I'm having a lot of fun doing it. So that's why I'm doing this, and that's why I'm sticking with the Previsible journey. But to the second part of your question, the reason that I'm doing this isn't the only reason that I believe that everybody else should do it, right? Like, everybody else should have their own motivation. Some people want to grow into SEO and then become PMs. Some people want to grow into SEO and become great PR and content marketers. And I think one of the interesting things about SEO is that it's not a linear journey. It's actually a multifaceted discipline. And because of that, the growth path, your own career path, can go in a variety of different areas. You don't just go like I did from an SEO, in-house SEO, to becoming a CEO. That's a pretty uncommon path. And I don't necessarily think that most SEOs are going to go through that path. But that was my path. And so I think everybody needs to understand how they can take that next career move. And in some cases, it's not necessarily beholden to being in the SEO discipline.
Love it. Love it.
I actually have such a packed and loaded question, so I'm going to actually challenge you and see if you can elevator pitch this answer in 1 minute. One of our users actually commented this one, and my apologies, I actually can't pick up your name on my system. But aligning with our last question, which was basically, how is AI affecting the search and content industry? This user had also asked, what are your predictions for the future of SEO and how can we adapt? So yeah.
Well, yeah, loaded indeed. So So the first thing right off the bat is, remember when we were talking about earlier about like technical skills and content skills and all these different ways to use those as levers? Well, there's a whole new set of skills coming our way, and that is the development of these AI skills, right? And whether it's how we better leverage and utilize RAG, how we better utilize different platforms and processes. AI skills is the new knowledge worker power. Like, if you can define your skills in the utility of AI, you have a whole new versatility. You are a whole new level of SEO. And the reality is, this has happened to SEO before. We just don't talk about it, right? So this isn't the first time this has happened in our industry. I remember a day where I could literally just call any backlink company and my results would just skyrocket. That isn't a great skill. Still nonetheless, but not a great skill in my opinion. But that used to be a real strategy and a real artwork of scaling your SEO. We've adapted and migrated our skills over the 20-year span of backlinking strategies, and that being the core centerpiece, to now a content quality era. And we're now moving into this AI era. I don't know what we're going to coin it or define it as, but those are the most important skills that every single SEO should be developing. So what does that mean? That means go use every platform you can get your hands on. And most of these are cheap, right? If you're not paying for 4 or 5 different LLM models like Perplexity to OpenAI to you name it, and testing them and playing with them and experimenting with them, you're missing out. If you're not going and trying something new with Llama and trying to figure something out, or testing with platforms that various companies or processes, more specifically, that various companies or in some cases universities or research institutions are building around AI and trying them for SEO, you're missing out. Those are the skills that are going to define the future of SEOs. And I fundamentally believe that as we grow in understanding how to use them for business impact, we're going to be able to really reshape what it means to do SEO. Does that mean that we're like obsolete? No. Human intervention will always be critical. One of my favorite stories to tell people right now is what's happening around neuroscience, and how we've just completed, literally, I think it was this week, if I'm not mistaken, the entire neurological mapping of the fruit fly's brain. Now, there's something like 50 million neurological connections in a fruit fly's brain. We've never been able to map it. We've never been able to map all the different connections, like what controls, how you fly, or that you feel there's a, predator coming, or, mating with other fruit flies, or that there's a fruit there that you should eat. And so all these things are now mapped, right, in a fruit fly. Now, this is an amazing feat because we've never been able to do that with a brain, and now we have. But the funniest thing about it is they used AI to do this whole process, obviously, and they realized that as they were doing this, there was a bunch of errors. And the only way to really resolve this was to go and get neuroscientists to come in and fix the errors. And as they fixed the errors, the model learned, and the model avoided more errors down the road. So here's the reality. You still have to be a good SEO and all the other stuff to become a great SEO in the AI utility. Just like you had to go to college for over a decade to become a neuroscientist, now you can become a great neuroscientist of AI. The same thing is happening in SEO, and those are going to be the skills that transition and reform our industry.
Well, I love that analogy. To end it off. Jordan, I honestly wish like we had 2 hours with you. It was so amazing chatting to you, and it was so fun to pick your brain. Thank you so much for your insights, and I know that there were a few people in the comment section that we unfortunately had to miss. So everyone that is listening, please go follow Jordan and bombard his DMs with messages.
Please do. I can answer any questions.
Yeah, Jordan, thank you so much for coming on. And have a lovely Friday. And we will be uploading this to YouTube and Spotify. And shout you out. And we'll chat very soon again.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Jordan. Really appreciate it.